Hello and welcome to the Ukrainian Town Television. My name is Mark Kaplan and my co-host is Melania Podlyak, and we are happy today to present our guest, Lieutenant General of the United States Army and ex-Commanding General of United States Army Europe, Ben Hodges. Ben, hi. It's nice to have you here.
Guys, thank you very much, and really cool to be on this program. The title threw me off, so now I'm even more excited.
Yeah, great. So let's start from the thing that is the most obvious, is on the nose, and everybody wants to know about it. It's media, especially American media and European media, have extensively reported on some sort of what they call disappointment in the Ukrainian counteroffensive. Ben, so how would you assess it? Do you believe it is even a fair assessment? Can you call something like Ukrainian counteroffensive, the way it is unrolling right now, disappointing?
Well, first of all, there's no doubt in my mind that Ukraine is going to be successful. It is going to win, is going to defeat Russia, and we're going to get all of Ukraine's territory back. How fast that happens depends, frankly, a lot on the United States. If the United States were to say, we want Ukraine to win, then there'd be no more excuses about ATACMS or F-16s. It would all be there. So despite the fact that the U.S. has not provided things that are sorely needed, like ATACMS, Ukrainian counteroffensive, I think, actually is going to do very well. Absolutely not disappointing. Of course, everybody would like to see it go faster, but there's a big difference between saying it's not going as fast as we like and it's not going as fast as we planned. I think that the Ukrainian General Staff has been so professional from the very beginning. They are not wasting lives of their soldiers. They are being, I think, correctly cautious, trying to develop the situation. They're learning. And at some point, they're going to find 2 or 3 seams, cracks, that can then be exploited. Most of the Ukrainian brigades are not even in the fight yet. And so I think people that are saying it's a disappointment or it's failed or it's stalled or whatever absolutely have no idea what they're really talking about. And of course, you guys know, because of where you live, I mean, there's always a fog, a sort of a cloud of uncertainty about what's going on, because sergeants and captains that are at the front fighting, they're not sending back reports for media or for old armchair generals like me. They're sending back combat reports. And there's always going to be a lag of a few days of what actually happens before we see it somehow. And I have to say that the General Staff has done a superb job protecting information, which protects the lives of Ukrainian soldiers and protects the mission. So, no, I'm not disappointed. I wish it could go faster, easier, less casualties, but it's only just getting started.
Guys, before we go next, I have a little ask. We want this video to be seen by as many people as possible and for YouTube algorithms to show it to as many people as possible. And you could actually help with this. You could like this video, you could subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below. Say, what do you think about the media coverage of Ukrainian counteroffensive? Also, you could help us by donating, buy me a coffee or YouTube subscription option. Thank you very much. I know, like, Ukrainian military leadership and political leadership often states that their aim is to reach the 1991 borders. And by now, like, with this, like, with how things are going, with all the mining in the land, with all the Russian, power they have to resist, like, it doesn't, like, seem visible. How would you see this happening? What weapons Ukraine would have to receive to make this happen, and make this happen not in 20 years, but like in feasible future, without losing several million people, 7 million lives or something like that?
Okay, so first of all, I have believed for some time that Ukraine could liberate Crimea by the end of August. But I always added the caveat that if the United States and if the West provided everything that was needed, it could be done. obviously, we have not provided everything that was needed. And I'm talking specifically long-range precision capabilities that could reach Sevastopol, that could reach Saki, that could reach Jankoy, make Crimea untenable for Russian forces. If Ukraine had ATACMS, for example, with a 300-kilometer range, the Black Sea Fleet would have already had to leave Sevastopol and relocate to Novorossiysk, about 400 kilometers to the east. Be much more difficult for them to continue launching missiles against apartment buildings and doing what they're doing. It would be much more difficult for them to disrupt grain shipments, for example. But because we have not provided Ukraine with the 300-kilometer range ATACMS or Grey Eagle drones or other certain capabilities, Crimea, which is sovereign Ukrainian territory, is in effect safe haven for Russian forces. And I think this is a terrible mistake on the part of the United States. And I hope in the coming days that decision will finally be changed, but I don't know for a fact that that's going to happen. That would be the first thing. Of course, F-16 or some sort of aircraft that would give Ukraine air support the way that we would always expect to have for any NATO land operation would make a big difference. The whole point of all of this is to prevent Russian artillery from hitting Ukrainian forces, to disrupt the logistics, and to hit Russian headquarters. If you eliminate headquarters and the logistics, then the only advantage the Russians have is going to be neutralized.
So you've mentioned it yourself, and it's everything that Ukrainians are wondering every day. It is obvious, as you have said, that Ukraine was not supplied with everything that is needed, and it's far from ideal. It's something, but it's still, not enough to battle the military as large as Russian. Why is there still such a delay, given that Ukraine has consistently proven that our ability to use the Western military technology very efficiently, I would say exceptionally effectively, and that way protect virtually continental Europe from Russia? Why is there still kind of sort of this, I'd say, cautiousness in supplying Ukraine with these weapons?
Yeah, I would say over cautiousness and incremental decision making. Why is that? I think the responsibility is squarely on the Biden administration for this. Now, I'm very proud of what my president has done and what my country has done over the past years with helping Ukraine, and certainly since February of last year, the amount of resources, money, ammunition, et cetera, 40 billion plus, that's not inconsequential. So I want to be very clear. I am proud of that. And I am proud that the president has kept 50 nations working together. That's significant. Obviously, the Kremlin never dreamed that would happen. But the administration stopped short of saying, we want Ukraine to win. They don't say that. Secretary Austin said it one time last year, and then you never heard it again. This is the administration saying we're not going to do that. Why is that? And this is a real question. I think there are two main reasons. Number one, the administration is, I think, overly concerned about the possibility of Russia somehow escalating. Now, I don't dismiss the threat or risk of Russia using a nuclear weapon. They clearly don't care how many innocent people they kill. They clearly don't care about destruction of the environment. And they still pretty much feel they can act with impunity. So I take it as a serious threat. But when I try to look at the likelihood, and not thinking like an American, but trying to look at it from all kinds of different angles, why would they do it? And there are zero positive outcomes for the Russians to use a nuclear weapon. Zero. I mean, there is no positive outcome for them. President Biden said there will be catastrophic consequences for Russia if they do it. President Xi has told the Russians not to do it. The Ukrainians have made it clear that even if Russia uses a nuclear weapon, they're not going to stop because they know what it's like to be under Russian occupation. So I think most of the people around Putin, the serious thinking people, understand this, that there are no positive outcomes. And in fact, they can see that we continue to hesitate, we deter ourselves just with the possibility of a Russian use of a nuclear weapon. We self-deter. And so for the Russians, in effect, their nuclear weapons are actually most effective when they don't use them. And so I think that's what will continue. I do worry about the nuclear power plant in Zaporizhia, and I'm assuming that every nation, all the senior people in the world are communicating to the Kremlin, you will be held responsible for this. There's no way nobody in the world would believe that somehow Ukraine did it themselves. So I think this is an important thing that should be happening. And the face and name of every single Russian that is anywhere in the chain of responsibility for that plant, from the guy who connects the explosives all the way up to the Kremlin, their face and name should be publicized so that they know they will be held accountable. The second reason that I think the Biden administration stopped short is China. I think that the Chinese have communicated they do not want to see a collapse of the Russian Federation, the regime. I don't know this, but I do know that the Chinese want to maintain continued access to cheap gas. They prefer status quo in general anyway, and certainly President Xi would not want to see another autocrat be exposed as so vulnerable for his own reasons. And so I think they have communicated to the United States that do not allow something that would lead to the collapse of the Russian Federation. I don't know that. That's just my analysis.
Interesting.
It's hard to win wars without the aim to win. But yeah, do you think, by the way, you mentioned the Zaporizhia nuclear plant, do you think it could be equal to the use of weapons of mass destruction? Will it be felt like that, or is it like not there yet?
Of course, I don't know the thinking inside the National Security Council or the White House on this, but there have been members of Congress have come out and said that it should be treated that way. So there is actually a lot of pressure from the Congress in a strong bipartisan way on the White House to be more forthcoming, more aggressive, to declare that we want Ukraine to win. So this is a positive thing, and that people should take heart that the strong bipartisan support for Ukraine in the Congress, and which is also reflected in recent opinion polls in the United States as well. But the administration, which is loaded with really good, talented, hardworking people, the fact is, all of the people there that used to work on Russia in the Obama administration are the ones in the Biden administration. And so I think they did a terrible job of how they handled Russia back then, and now they're doing it again. And so I think there's a concern also that, okay, what happens if the regime collapses? I mean, what happens? Do you have? By the way, I'm completely fine with it. I think Russia has always been an empire. It's never been a state. It's never had to reckon with all of its crimes, and until it actually is, the regime is wrecked, and they form a state, like Ukraine is a state, Germany is a state, the United States is a entity, a state. Then we'll just get more Putin-type guys. That whole power structure remains in place as it has for the last 500 years. But if they were to destroy or create a catastrophic incident at Zaporizhia, I think there would be a lot of pressure. You had to respond. You know, already it was a mistake that we did zero after they blew up the Kakhovka Dam. And so I think, you know, more failed deterrence only leads to more provocation.
I was wondering, you as a former commander of the U.S. Army Europe, I know people have asked these questions a lot, and I know that, you know, it's kind of futile to talk about these things anymore, but lessons have to be, you know, learned from this entire ordeal. What could have been done by the EU especially, not to end up in a situation they have found themselves in. So no ammo, little skills, no clear defense strategy. I remember, as far as I'm concerned, at the beginning of the war, people actually, NATO members actually looked into the NATO defense strategy and were surprised that, certain countries would have to become battlefield for, in case Russia attacked. Why was everybody so relaxed? And is anything going to really change?
So this war in Ukraine, this Russian war in Ukraine, is what failed deterrence looks like. I mean, there's no doubt that Russia is the aggressor. They're 100% responsible for it. They could end it today, decision of one person. But they made decisions, I think, based partly on obviously over-exaggerating their own strength and a lack of respect for Ukraine, but because they were sure that we, the West, would not do anything. We did nothing after Georgia. Not really. They still have Russian troops occupying 20% of Georgia. We did nothing after they jumped over President Obama's red line in Syria and supported the Assad regime in destroying Aleppo and using chemical weapons against Syrians. And then we really did nothing after they invaded Ukraine in 2014. The Minsk process, all that was a joke. There were no sanctions of any real consequence. And there was a huge debate in the U.S. about whether or not to provide Javelin to Ukrainian troops. I mean, that was the height of the strategic debate. So, why was that? And that was not just one administration. That was over Republican and Democratic administrations. And why was Europe so unprepared? And I think it has to do with a lack of a belief in the threat. There was just an unwillingness in Europe because it seemed so far away, and political leaders are not willing, particularly the further west in Europe you go, but even in the U.S. You may remember back when Romney and Obama were running against each other, and Romney said that Russia was a major threat, and Obama mocked him, said, "Oh, welcome to the 80s, man." That was kind of the Obama administration. I'm not blaming them alone, but that was a pervasive thought in Washington, not just in Berlin or Paris. And so, this naive belief that somehow if we just did a lot of business with Russia, that they would kind of become more westernized and that sort of thing. So that's a long answer to the question, but it's not an easy answer. It was a lack of appreciation of the threat and an unwillingness to acknowledge who Russia really is, that they're a bunch of thugs off the steps that will steal everything in sight. And so, and don't care how many innocent people get killed in the process. And so people disarmed, stopped making ammunition, including us. And so I think that's the bottom line. We just didn't really believe there was a threat. Germany was building Nord Stream 2 up until the end of 2021, still working on that. Unbelievable. And there is still a lot of other stuff despite sanctions. There's still a lot of business going on, including U.S., that has not been completely dried up. Now, I say this with all respect to my Ukrainian friends. What the hell was Ukraine doing after 2014? I mean, why weren't you making ammunition like crazy? Why weren't you building weapons like crazy? I mean, Russia had already invaded Ukraine. I remember going to that wonderful tank plant in Kharkiv in 2017. I was, being a history nerd, I was so excited to go out to this famous place where the T-34 was born. And of course, they have a shrine to the T-34 there. They're very proud of it. And they were doing repairs on tanks that had been damaged. And then I see a row of brand new tanks. I mean, top quality tanks. And I said, are those going to the ATO? Which is, you remember, that's what?
Yeah.
All right.
100. Yeah.
And they said, no, those are going to Thailand. I said, what? Yeah, we're exporting these to Thailand. I said, you're kidding me. You're humping our leg for Javelin and you're exporting top quality modern tanks to Thailand? And the guy said, well, the Ministry of Defense is not willing to pay. And so we have to stay in business too. And I thought, oh my God. And so I think inside Ukraine, there was also failed deterrence. I was in Kyiv in the first week of February last year. I was there with a small delegation to help communicate to our Ukrainian friends that, like, look, this is really coming. You have got to get ready. And Kyiv did not feel like a city that was going to be attacked in the next 2 weeks.
Well, that is a fair assessment. True. That's unfortunately very true. That is correct.
Right then, I think we're out of questions for now.
No, I have one more question.
Oh, you have one more. Okay, good.
Yeah, I have. Which it's not a silly, but still, if Ukraine was to ever receive ATACMS, what do you think would be most important and should be most desired first 5 targets?
Yeah. Sevastopol is number 1, number 2, number 3. I mean, that place has got to be hit, whether it's ships there or maintenance facilities or the fueling facilities, so that the Black Sea Fleet has to leave. And I think Crimea clearly is the decisive terrain of this war. Ukraine will never be safe or secure as long as Russia occupies it. Ukraine will never be able to rebuild its economy as long as Russia occupies Crimea. So we have to send a very clear signal that, Crimea, we're coming for you and we're going to liberate you. And step 1 is getting rid of the Black Sea Fleet and obviously the air base at Saki and the logistics hub at Jankoy. After that, I think the General Staff knows that the principal headquarters and main logistics hubs elsewhere inside Ukraine, you hit those and that will have the effect that is needed. I would not hit the Kerch Bridge unless Kerch Bridge is being used to bring in more stuff. Actually, I think you want to leave it open so the Russians can get the hell out of there. Leave it up for them to their own off ramp.
Interesting. Yeah. Sounds great. Good plan.
I'm a little aroused right now. Only thinking
with the thought of a bombing Crimea. Yeah, I know. It feels. I mean, if we had this conversation like 2 years ago or 3 years ago, that would sound like something out of a insane asylum. But now it kind of a bunch of crazy people just bombing Crimea. But now, like, look, it's very much. I hope it's possible.
You should do the only right thing you should do. Yeah.
Well, I think. When you look at the map, and of course I carry my Ukraine map with me everywhere I go, and I try to track the battle of what's going on and where we at. But when you look at the map and you see where Crimea sits, I mean, a brand new lieutenant could say, "Wow, Crimea is really important," and because of our policy, Russia in effect has safe haven inside Ukraine's sovereign territory, and I think we have to. We have to stop that. Your president has already said we won't use ATACMS against targets inside of Russia, although I think under the UN Charter they'd be entitled to do so. So I think it's if Crimea is liberated, then this whole thing is over. There won't be much enthusiasm in the Kremlin for hanging on to Donetsk and Luhansk after Crimea is gone.
Yeah, absolutely. That's true.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. This was insightful, very great conversation. Thank you for being with us and explaining things to us.
Thank you for the privilege, and I'm proud of both of you.